Lonely rancher found Apache girl hanging on a tree with a sign, "White man don't forgive." Under the merciless sun of New Mexico, Calder Wyatt rode with a slow, steady rhythm, dust lifting with every step of his dun mare. He had been trailing a lost heifer for half a day, the prints gone soft in the cracked earth. The silence out here was sacred, broken only by the faint creak of leather, the whine of wind, and the occasional call of a distant hawk. Calder liked it this way. Alone, quiet, predictable. But then he heard it. So faint it might have been wind. A sound like a breath that had forgotten how to breathe. He froze in his saddle, head tilting, heart slowing. It came again. A whimper, weak and sharp like a thread about to snap. He dismounted quickly, tying the reins to a dead limb. With his rifle slung over his back, he moved through the scraggly junipers and boulders until he came upon a clearing ringed by old cottonwoods. And there, beneath the oldest tree, he saw her. She was hanging by the wrists, arms stretched above her, her body limp like a broken doll. Her feet barely touched the dirt. Her skin was sun-dark and dust-covered, her long black hair matted with sweat and blood. Her chest rose in shallow, erratic breaths. But she was alive. Calder's eyes snapped to the crude wooden sign nailed to the tree above her head. The words were scrawled in thick red paint, angry and jagged. "White man, don't forgive." He stepped back involuntarily, bile rising in his throat. The air thickened. A warning? A message? A curse? He glanced around, scanning the ridges, the rocks. No movement, no sound. Just the wind brushing through dead leaves like whispers. His hand went to the knife on his belt. "Christ," he muttered, "what the hell did they do to you?" The girl stirred, barely. Her head lolled forward and he saw the raw burn marks where the rope bit into her wrists. He swallowed hard. "You hear me, girl?" he asked, voice hoarse. No response. "I am not here to hurt you," he said softer, almost to himself. His boots crunched forward, closer. He could see her face now, young, maybe 18, with a high brow and a strong jaw, her cheeks hollow from thirst. There was dried blood on her lip. He reached up, touched the rope. It was twisted mesquite fiber, harsh and old. Whoever tied it had meant for her to suffer, not just hang. He pulled out his knife. His fingers trembled. That sign. It screamed at him. He heard echoes of things he never said, never did. And yet, it made him guilty. It made him hesitate. But she groaned again, and that sound undid him. "I ain't all of 'em," he whispered, blade slipping into the rope. "I ain't that." But with one firm slice, the rope gave way. She fell forward, and he caught her just in time. Her body was warm, burning even, and light in his arms, like she had no bones left. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, frightened, unfocused. Calder eased her down to the ground, one knee in the dust. He poured water from his canteen onto a cloth and dabbed her cracked lips. "Easy now," he said. "You're safe, least for the moment." She blinked once. Then again, still no words, but her hand clutched weakly at his sleeve. He looked at the sign one last time, then at her. Then he pulled off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You got a name?" he asked gently. "Nothing. Guess we'll find one for you," he murmured. He stood, lifting her with effort, cradling her like something not yet broken. "But for now, you're with me." And with that, Calder Wyatt stepped back into the wilderness, carrying a girl marked for death and a secret heavy enough to hang a man. The sun was dipping low by the time Calder reached his ranch, just a modest outpost clinging to the edges of a desert too stubborn to forget violence. A single windmill creaked on the edge of the fence line, and the old barn sagged like it mourned something. The house itself was one room and a loft, roof patched with old sheet metal, but it stood, solid and honest, like the man who built it. Calder eased the girl from the saddle and carried her inside. She was fevered, her head pressed to his chest, whispering breaths like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor. He laid her on the cot and unwrapped the coat, careful not to startle her. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, dark and wide and distant, but they watched him. The lantern flickered against the walls as he poured water into a metal basin and set it near her feet. He grabbed a clean cloth from a shelf and knelt. Her legs were bruised, scraped, one ankle swollen. Rope burns marred her wrists like brands. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, more to break the silence than to expect any reply. "Just cleanin' up a bit." He dipped the cloth into the warm water and wrung it out. Then, slowly, reverently, he took her right foot and placed it in the basin. She flinched, just barely. He paused, waited. When she did not pull away, he began to wash the dust and blood from her skin, his movements gentle, precise, like he was touching something sacred. The water turned red and brown. He worked in silence, careful not to meet her gaze for too long, though he felt it on him, like a blade drawn halfway, unsure whether to strike or fall. Her lips parted once, as if to speak, but no sound came. "Reckon you don't talk much," he muttered, not unkindly. "That's all right. Silence is better than most things, most days." He finished the first foot, then the other. She let him. When he was done, he wrapped them in soft cloth strips and set her feet gently on a folded blanket. "You remind me of a river I used to camp near," he said quietly, almost to himself. It was dry most of the year, looked dead, but after the rains, it ran fast and deep. Had a name, but the locals called it Quiet Snake. Don't know why, just quiet. He looked at her again, studying her features in the lamplight. Cheekbones sharp as ridge lines, lips cracked but full, dark lashes thick with sand. She was young, too young for this kind of suffering, but there was something old behind her eyes, something that did not flinch from pain, only waited for it to pass. "I'll call you Lena," he said softly, "just for now. You look like a Lena. Quiet, but strong." She blinked once, slowly, no protest, no nod, just breath. Calder stood, hands wet, and reached for a blanket to cover her. He tucked it around her shoulders, then stepped back. "If you're hungry, there's beans. Not much, but better than air." Still no answer. He grabbed his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He would sleep out by the barn tonight. Give her the space. It was not right for her to be watched by a stranger, especially not one with blood in his past and questions in his eyes. Before he stepped outside, he looked back one last time. She had shifted slightly. Eyes closed, lips no longer trembling. The basin still sat beside the cot, tinged with the color of what had been done to her. He picked it up and emptied it outside, watching the water soak into the thirsty ground. Inside, she dreamed of fire, of horses, of ropes cutting skyward, and of hands, rough but gentle, washing the hurt away without asking anything in return. The days that followed passed with the slow rhythm of desert life, but the silence inside the house was different now, thicker, charged with something just beyond reach. Lena, as Calder still called her, ate when he brought food, though never much. She moved with caution, eyes always alert, posture tight like an animal who had been caged too long. She never spoke, but he caught her watching him when she thought he would not notice. At night, Calder left her the cot and took to the barn, his rifle beside him. He pretended it was to give her space, but the truth was more complicated. He was afraid, not of her, but of what her presence meant. That sign on the tree still burned in his mind. "White man don't forgive." Whoever wrote it had meant for her to die slow, and whoever they were, they might still be coming. It was 3 mornings later when he first saw the boot print. Slightly smaller than his, newer than his, and angled toward the barn. Calder squatted beside it in the hard-packed dirt and studied the heel. Military issue, cavalry. The print was fresh, no more than a few hours old. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Nothing but sagebrush and heat shimmer. Back inside, Lena sat by the window, still and silent. She did not look at him when he entered, but her body tensed. "You seen anyone?" he asked. She said nothing, only pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I think we've got company," Calder murmured, more to himself. That evening he kept the lantern low and stayed by the porch, rifle across his knees. The wind had died. Coyotes howled far off, and the stars blinked into view like ghosts waking up. Lena did not sleep. He could hear her moving inside, pacing the floor in slow circles. It was around midday the next day when the rider came. Dust curled behind the chestnut horse as it approached. The man atop it wore the blue and gold of the U.S. Cavalry. His rifle was holstered, his hat low, his jaw rough with stubble. Calder stepped down from the porch, one hand resting casually on his belt. The soldier reined in his horse and squinted down. "You Calder, Wyatt?" "Depends who's askin'." "Lieutenant Graham, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive." The man pulled a folded notice from his breast pocket and handed it down. "You seen this one?" Calder took the paper, already knowing what it would show. A crude sketch of a young Apache girl. Sharp eyes, long hair. The words, "Wanted for murder and escape. Dangerous. Reward, $50, 0 cents." Calder looked up slowly. "Can't say I have." "You sure?" the soldier asked, leaning forward. "Small, quiet. Might be hurt. Might be hidin'. We think she was rescued or taken by someone passin' near the Cottonwood Flats." Calder held the paper a second longer, then folded it and handed it back. "Ain't seen nobody but jackrabbits and a cow that don't listen." Lieutenant Graham narrowed his eyes. "She's not just a runaway, Mr. Wyatt. She's part of a violent group. Savages. That sign they left? They mean it." Calder's jaw tightened. "If I see anything, I'll send word." The soldier studied him for a moment longer. Then he nodded once and turned his horse. "See you do." Calder watched him ride off until the dust disappeared. Inside, Lena stood just beyond the curtain. She had heard every word. She stared at him, unmoving. He stepped in, took off his hat, and leaned it against the door. "They came looking. Showed me a paper. Said you were wanted." She did not speak. "I told them no." Her eyes narrowed, confused. Suspicious. "I don't know what you did, Lena, and maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine." He turned to the stove, pretending to stir the beans he had already made. Behind him she moved, barely a shift, a small breath, and in that moment, trust cracked the silence just a little wider. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the yard as the wind softened for a while. It had been a strange day. Too quiet, like the desert was holding its breath. Calder sat on the porch, sharpening his knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. Each pass of steel on stone echoed faintly through the open yard. He focused on the motion more than the blade, as if the repetition might keep his thoughts from drifting too far toward the woman sleeping inside. Or not sleeping. He paused, cocking his head. The faint crunch of footsteps on gravel reached his ears. Not a coyote, not a horse. Something lighter, human. He looked up. Lena was outside. It was the first time she had stepped beyond the threshold on her own since he brought her home. Her bare feet touched the earth tentatively, like she was testing if it would still hold her. The woven blanket he had left folded at the edge of her cot hung from her shoulders, trailing like a second skin. She walked slowly, her steps uneven but certain, toward the far end of the yard where the barn stood watch. Calder set the knife aside, not moving at first. He watched her, not wanting to shatter the moment. She looked smaller in the light, more fragile, and yet something in the way she moved had changed. She was not escaping, she was reclaiming. She reached the bare patch of dirt near the barn, a place where the wind had swept clean all debris. There she knelt, carefully, as if kneeling before something sacred, and let the blanket fall to her elbows. Her fingers moved with purpose as she picked up a stick and began to draw in the dust. Only then did Calder rise. He walked over slowly, boots quiet on the dirt, giving her space. He stood a few feet behind her, watching her hand trace lines into the earth. In the dirt she had drawn a bird, wings stretched wide, mid-flight, but flames encircled it like a burning crown. The lines were bold and sharp, etched with tension. The bird looked alive and in agony, its wings angled upward, as though trying to escape the fire or rise with it. Calder had seen war, seen symbols carved into rifles and burned into skin, but this was something older, a cry, a prayer. He squatted beside her, his voice low and respectful. "What's that?" Lena did not look up. Her face remained still, eyes focused on the drawing. For a long moment she said nothing, as if deciding whether or not to let the memory free. Then she spoke. "Bird in fire," she said, voice dry and cracked, like the riverbeds in midsummer. "My people's sign." Calder remained silent, his eyes never leaving the image. She tapped the center of the bird with the stick. "This was my father's, our family. We painted it on tents, carved it on boughs, always flying, always fire." Calder could feel the tension in her body, the way her shoulders pulled back, the tightness in her jaw. She was bracing for something. "They come. Soldiers. Whitecoats. Last spring," she continued haltingly, "say we must move. Far. Dry place. No food, no water. Say we're danger." She paused. The stick in her hand trembled. "We say no. We stay. We fight." Her voice thinned. "They burn, kill, my mother, my 2 brothers. Burn the old ones inside the tent." Calder clenched his fists slowly, jaw tight. Something old and angry stirred in his chest. "I run, hide. They find me. Beat, tie me, call me thief, say I took rifle. I didn't." Then she turned, locking eyes with him for the first time. There was fury in her voice now. "I did not steal. I did not kill. I did nothing wrong." Her voice echoed in the open air like thunder across dry land. Calder did not speak for a moment. Then his voice came, low but certain. "I believe you." She turned back to the dirt, dropped the stick. Her hands fell into her lap, then her shoulders began to shake. At first she made no sound, just silent tremors. But then the sobs came, raw and unfiltered. She curled forward, arms wrapped around her knees, hair falling like a curtain. The pain was too big for her body, and it poured out in waves. Calder stayed beside her, unmoving, unmoved. He did not reach for her, did not try to comfort with empty words. Instead, he reached out and pressed his hand into the dirt beside the flaming bird, palm down, fingers spread, his skin against the dust she had shaped with grief. It was not touch. It was testimony. She felt it. Eventually her breathing slowed. She lifted her head, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Their eyes met, unshielded. "You can call me Lena," she whispered. Calder gave a small nod, voice like gravel and wind. "All right then. Lena it is." They sat together in silence as the sun slid behind the ridge and the fire bird in the dirt faded into shadow. But its ashes, like the truth, remained. That night the wind whistled low through the rafters, whispering through the thin walls like a ghost remembering its name. Calder sat by the fire, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled, tending a kettle of beans. Lena stood by the window, arms folded around herself, watching the night settle over the desert. The silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It was something gentler now, like shared breath. She turned suddenly. "You want to know the truth?" Calder looked up, his spoon pausing mid-stir. He nodded once, careful not to press her with words. She walked slowly to the table, sat across from him. Her voice was quiet but clear. "My father was a miner chief," she began. "Our band small, peaceful. We traded with settlers, even learned their god. We had rules, boundaries. We wanted to live." Calder listened, his face unreadable but focused. "Full winter ago," she continued, "a white woman was found dead near our hunting ground. Throat cut. Her husband said it was us." Her fingers tensed around the table's edge. "But it was not. She died because he killed her. Everyone knew, but they blamed us." Her eyes found Calder's. "The soldiers came, not just them. Ranchers, too, town men with rifles and fear. They said they were taking justice." She swallowed hard, the pain rising in her throat. "They burned our camp, shot my brothers while they slept. My mother died holding the prayer beads the priest gave her. They left my father hanging from our council pole. Calder lowered his eyes. They found me in a hollow tree. I was hiding. I had a knife, but they took it. Said I was planning revenge. Said I was dangerous. They tied me, questioned me, beat me. Then they took me to that tree you found me on. Hung me up like bait. For who? Calder asked, his voice a low scrape. For the rest of us. For anyone still alive and angry. She stared at him, then asked softly, "Why did you cut me down?" He looked at her for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. "Because once," he said. Her brow furrowed. "My family," Calder said, voice flat. "Last spring, raiders hit our ranch. Apache, they said. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I was out hunting, came back to ashes. My sister was 16. I heard her crying in the barn. But I was scared. I didn't go in. I waited for help. She died before anyone came. The silence after that was different. Not empty. Heavy. You saved me. Because you couldn't save her," Lena whispered. He nodded. She studied him. "If I had been white, would you still have pulled the knife?" Calder stood slowly, walked around the table until he was in front of her. She looked up, searching his face. He reached down, cupped her chin gently in one hand. His fingers were calloused, but his touch was careful, measured. "I don't love skin," he said. "I love what breathes under it." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She reached for his hand, pressed her cheek into his palm. And then, as if by instinct, they leaned into each other. The kiss was quiet, hesitant at first, then fuller, as if both had been holding their breath for too long and finally remembered how to exhale. Her hands trembled on his chest. His arms circled her back. The fire popped softly behind them. Later, they stood in the small kitchen, candlelight flickering against old wooden beams. Their shadows moved as one on the far wall, a slow dance neither of them had ever learned but somehow knew. Outside, the desert wind calmed for the first time in days. Inside, something began to mend. The wind returned with the morning, gusting harder than usual, carrying the scent of sand and distant smoke. Calder felt it in his bones, something shifting. He had lived long enough under this sky to recognize the weight before a storm, even if it came with boots instead of clouds. 3 days had passed since the kiss, since the words neither of them said aloud took root in the silence. Lena had begun to move more freely around the ranch. She helped feed the animals, swept the floor, even laughed once, softly when Calder cursed the stubborn mule that refused to eat. But the peace was thin. By noon, a trail of dust rose from the east. Calder stood by the fence, jaw tight, rifle resting against the porch. 3 riders approached, local men in canvas coats and old hats, rifles slung across their backs. Their leader wore a tin badge on his chest that looked more self-appointed than earned. "Wyatt," the man called as he dismounted. "Heard tell you might be harboring someone don't belong." Calder kept his voice even. "You hear a lot of things, Joe. Don't make 'em true." Joe Prescott spat into the dirt. "A girl. Apache. There's a reward, $50 cash and the thanks of every God-fearing man west of the Pecos." "You come all this way for a rumor?" Prescott's eyes narrowed. "We aim to check inside, just in case." Calder stepped down from the porch slowly. "You got a warrant?" Prescott snorted. "You think this is a court, Wyatt?" The other 2 men shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. The air hung brittle. "I'm the only one lives here," Calder said, voice calm. "Ain't no girl, just ghosts and goats." Prescott stared at him for a long moment, then gave a tight nod. "If you're lying, you'll burn with her." They rode off without checking the house, but the message was clear. They would be back, with more men, and less patience. That night, Calder sat by the fire behind the barn, the stars hidden behind heavy clouds. In his hand was the crude wooden sign he had pulled from where he buried it. Faded now, but still readable, still hateful. "White man don't forgive." He stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing over the letters. Then he stood and carried it to the fire pit. No ceremony, no speech. He laid it down among the kindling and struck a match. The flames rose slowly, then swallowed the words in orange and gold. The wood cracked and curled inward, as if the hate itself resisted dying. Behind him, footsteps. Lena. She wore one of his old coats, too large on her frame, the sleeves rolled twice. She stepped beside him, eyes on the fire, not speaking. But her presence spoke enough. The flames danced in her eyes, reflecting something that looked like mourning, and something like freedom. "I should have burned it sooner," Calder said quietly. She did not answer, but she moved closer, close enough for her shoulder to touch his. She gripped the coat tighter around herself, her fingers knotted in the fabric. "Thank you," she said softly. The words were simple, but they landed like something sacred. He looked down at her, his heart heavy and alive all at once. The fire burned low, embers glowing. Above them, the wind slowed to a hush. And for the first time since he cut her down from that tree, there was no sign left of what had been written against her. Only heat, smoke, and the weight of what they had chosen instead. The next morning brought no wind, just stillness, thick and unnatural. Calder rose early, packed dry biscuits, jerky, and a canteen of water into the saddlebag. The air around the ranch felt tighter, more watched. He had seen smoke on the horizon, too steady to be a campfire. Word had spread. They were out of time. Lena stood by the fence line, hair braided back, wrapped in the same coat she had worn by the fire. Her face was calm, but her eyes held questions. "We have to go," Calder said, tying the final strap on his pack. "Tonight." She nodded, already knowing. "There's land south of here," he continued, "past the border. Some say the Apaches still live free in the Sierra Madres, far from soldiers, far from signs." He paused. "We can make it, if we ride hard." Lena stepped closer, so close he could see the soft flush on her cheeks. She reached for his hand and held it, firm. He looked down at her, voice barely above a whisper. "You'll come with me?" She pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath warm through his shirt. Then she answered, in Apache, slow and careful, "I want to live. I want to live as your wife." Calder closed his eyes. That one sentence carried more weight than 1,000 promises. He kissed the top of her head, breathed in her hair like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. By sundown, they were ready. 2 horses saddled, the ranch left behind, no note, no fire, no goodbye, just a quiet door left swinging and a home turned to memory. They rode through the desert under cover of stars, moonlight painting the ridges silver. Lena leaned forward against her horse, her movements steady, practiced. She did not ask what lay ahead. She only followed. 10 miles from the border, the land opened into low scrub brush and stone cliffs. Calder scanned the horizon constantly, every shadow a threat. His gut turned tight. Then the shot came. A crack echoed across the plain. Calder jerked in the saddle, then collapsed sideways, sliding hard into the dirt. "Calder!" Lena screamed, leaping from her horse. He clutched his side, blood already soaking through his shirt. "Keep going," he rasped. "No." Another shot whizzed past them, striking the rock behind. From the ridgeline, 2 figures appeared, riders, rifles raised. Calder groaned, pulling himself up. "We have to move!" Lena hooked her arm under his shoulder, trying to lift him. "Believe me," he growled. "I won't." Through sheer will, they stumbled toward the nearby rocks, bullets cutting through the night. Calder's boots dragged behind him, but he forced one step after another. Every breath came wet, his vision blurred. Somehow they reached a narrow gap between 2 cliffs, a hidden pass. Lena half dragged, half carried him inside, pressed him to the stone wall, her own chest heaving. The shots faded behind them. The riders would not follow through the rocks. Not without losing speed, not without risk. In the shadow of the pass, Calder collapsed to his knees, blood dripping onto the dust. He looked up at her, pain and wonder both in his eyes. "You said, you wanted to be my wife." She knelt beside him, cupped his face. "I meant it." His lips curved, even through the pain. "Then we better make it through this pass." She nodded, and for the first time since they met, Lena prayed, not to the gods of the settlers, but to the spirits of fire, wind, and survival. Because love, in this place, was always a gamble, and tonight they were betting everything. The tent flaps rustled gently in the river breeze, moonlight slipping through the stitched seams like silver threads. Outside, crickets sang low, and the water whispered over stone. Inside, Calder lay propped on folded blankets, his breath slow but strong now. The fever had passed. The worst was over. Lena sat beside him, a basin of cool water at her side, gently wiping down his brow. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You always this bossy with your patients?" he murmured. She raised an eyebrow, but smiled. "Only the ones too stubborn to die." He chuckled, then winced as the laughter tugged at the stitches in his side. She hushed him gently, placing a palm over his chest to steady him. The silence between them deepened. Not awkward, but full. Then, as the wind sighed outside, he spoke again. "Tell me something true," Calder said, his voice softer now, touched by something raw. "What's your real name?" Lena looked down, hesitating. Then she reached for his hand and guided it to her chest, just over her heart. "Ayana," she said. "It means peaceful river. My father gave it to me." Calder closed his eyes for a beat, as if letting the name settle into him like a prayer. When he opened them again, there was warmth behind the weariness. "Ayana," he repeated, tasting the word. "You're the only peace I've ever known." She didn't cry this time. She only held his hand tighter. Months passed. On the southern edge of the territory, where the border blurred into mesquite groves and dry wind-carried scents of sage and wood smoke, a small lodge stood near the river's bend. Made of pine and hide, strong but humble, it sat surrounded by whispering reeds and wildflowers. In the shade of its awning, Ayana Salvatierra sat cross-legged, stitching a tiny white shirt. Her belly had rounded gently, visible now beneath her woven sash. Humming quietly, she worked the needle through soft cotton, her fingers sure and calm. Beyond the garden, Calder trained a young mustang, murmuring low commands, patient and firm. Every so often he glanced back toward the lodge, catching sight of her silhouette through the light curtain, and every time he smiled. Inside, the walls bore no trophies, no portraits, just bundles of herbs, 2 books, and a child's blanket waiting to be finished. Ayana moved through it like the breath of the place itself, present, grounding, full of quiet life. One evening, she walked down to the river, the same path she'd taken for months now. The current moved slow and certain. She stepped barefoot into the shallows, let the cool water kiss her skin, and laid both hands over her belly. "Little one," she whispered, "your father, he didn't just forgive, he loved, and he kept his promise. Every one." Behind her, footsteps padded across the grass. Calder came to stand beside her, their fingers entwining without a word. Together, they watched the river drift under the dusk, where stars began to blink into view. No one had expected 2 hunted souls to find something like this, but somehow in a world of scars and storm, they had created a quiet patch of earth where love had taken root. Not the kind written in history books, but the kind that endured. And the river kept flowing, peaceful, like her name, like their life, like something finally, truly, home. If this story moved your heart, if it reminded you that even in the harshest deserts, love can bloom like water from stone, then this is the place for you. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of forbidden romance, quiet bravery, and love that defies time, blood, and boundary. From dusty trails to whispered promises, every story is crafted to stay with you long after the last word. Where bullets missed, but hearts didn't. Subscribe now and never miss a heartbeat from the Wild West.